Welcome back to Jeff Koinange live right here at Citizen Television. We're going to go straight and speak to Nairobi Senator Johnson Sakaja joining us live here. Senator, good to see you. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you for having me on the show today, Jeff. This is a bit different.
It is very different. Close but far, but safe. Real quick,
Close but far.
I always ask my guests this question. How are you doing?
Given the circumstances, we're good.
Yeah. Okay, let me hit you then real hard.
Hopeful. Yeah.
Under the circumstances.
Yes.
So Parliament is back? Both houses?
Parliament was back yesterday, and there's, we've adjusted the sittings.
Right.
So the Senate is meeting once a week. The National Assembly is meeting once a week because of the social distancing requirements. The numbers have been reduced.
Okay.
So we're having fewer members attending the sittings just to ensure that we follow those guidelines.
All right. On top of all that, the legislature as a whole has been accused as the weakest link in this COVID-19 pandemic fight, that you guys literally ran away and left Kenyans at their hour of need.
Jeff, I think that's to some extent an unfair indictment on the legislature. And I'll give you an example. My committee, which was set up on the 1st of April, has been meeting. We've conducted 14 sittings. We've listened to the public. We've gotten views on coronavirus. And in that short time, we have a bill that is ready and that we hope will be passed. And I'm sure will be passed by the Senate within the next 1.5 weeks, really.
Okay.
And so in as much as, we don't have the luxury of meeting every day like we would want to, various committees, I know other committees also in the National Assembly are planning to conduct their meetings. The Delegated Legislation Committee has conducted, hearings on some of the regulations. So Parliament is working and Parliament must continue to work. We've not suspended the Constitution. We've not suspended oversight. And we must continue to be able to perform those roles because Kenyans need it most now than before. Okay,
it's called the Pandemic Rescue and Management Bill. Senator, tell us real quick, give us the highlights.
Well, Jeff, the highlights are really simple. In this time of a pandemic, there is need for a legal framework on how pandemics are dealt with. We decided to call it the Pandemic, Response and Management Bill, so that it is not only about corona. It's about, we legislate for posterity. So it's about any pandemic that might come in the next 5, 10, God forbid, as far, out there as possible. So number one, it deals with how we define a pandemic, how it is declared, because a pandemic must be one of a global nature, and the World Health Organization communicates, the Cabinet Secretary thereafter tells the president, informs the president of a pandemic, and with the advice of the National Security Council, then the president declares a pandemic. When such a pandemic is declared, then the bill comes into force during the period of a pandemic. So it provides for a national, response committee and how that committee works with the counties. We've seen in the beginning there wasn't very good coordination, and there's need for coordination between the national government and the county governments in dealing with the pandemic. It deals with, creating a fund through which, all resources that are required are able to be availed. It deals with certain tax reliefs, moratorium on penalties, the issue of loans and mortgages, contractual obligations, tenancy agreements, how to cushion, and I think that is one of the most important parts, how to cushion the most vulnerable people in society, as well as then how do you also declare the end of the pandemic and wind up that fund for that period. So it's a simple bill, but it goes to the root of how we need to be responding to this. Jeff, before we did this, we've analyzed more than 50 other countries, the responses by their parliaments, the legislation they have put in place, the kind of regulations that are in force. And so this is really informed by best practice world over. And from comparative jurisdictions, really where we should be as a country. Okay. But if you allow me, Jeff, I must say that we are really proud of the work that the Cabinet Secretary and his team, that the President is doing, and the government. and the frontline health workers, I just pray for God to bless them. We're talking about how these people are putting their lives on the line, but are doing an amazing job. So we must commend them for the work they're doing. And so oversight in a time of pandemic like this, Jeff, is really not the normal antagonistic oversight of fighting, or that is negative sometimes. But it's really oversight to support the efforts of government to legislate. The minister cannot legislate. The minister cannot pass a bill. The minister cannot appropriate. Those are the functions of parliament. And that is the work we're doing as we speak, Jeff.
All right, Senator, let me ask you this. You talk about cushioning a lot of things, and amongst them is suspending rents, right, for vulnerable Kenyans.
No, Jeff, there's no provision of suspending. And let me say this, Jeff. Of course, today a lot of the papers were a bit sensational. I understand it's tough times. We must sell. And they said that this Sakaja bill or the coronavirus bill is suspending rent, suspending, everything. It is not. Jeff, we're saying, look, one, the strength of a country, and we have analyzed all of these jurisdictions. The strength of a country at a time of a pandemic is not what you do with the big players. It is how you cushion the vulnerable. So we're saying at a time, and if you look at section 29 of this pandemic bill, it talks about how tenancy agreements, if a tenant who, because of the pandemic, lacks the financial capacity to honor his rental obligations, number one, they must notify the landlord and enter into an agreement with that landlord on how they can be able, after the pandemic, or even during, in some extent, to enter an agreement between them to discuss and to agree how he can be able to, fulfill the obligations, whether it is a business premise or whether it is a residential premise. And once that is done, we've given leeway for the cabinet secretary at that time of housing to be able to, prescribe regulations that then cushion the landlord and the tenant further. So we want to protect both the landlord and the tenant. We're not telling people if there's a pandemic, don't pay rent. No. But we want to cushion because we don't want to see unnecessary evictions. We don't want to see, even some unscrupulous people coming in between agents, etc. But we want to say, look, if you're a landlord, and for instance, you've given some relief for a period of time, and I've seen many landlords doing that actually already, then you should be able, for instance, once that agreement is registered with the appropriate authorities, to be able even to go, first of all, to KRA and register that and say, because of this, then you are, you qualify to get certain tax reliefs, for instance, on your pay as you earn, on your rental tax income, so that you, if a landlord is happy, then the tenant, of course, will be happy and will be taken care of. Because if we start now chasing people tomorrow, the pandemic becomes worse. So it's cushioning, and it's looking at both sides of the coin, not just the tenant and not just the landlord. We must look at both sides of the coin.
All right,
many countries have passed this.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Senator, because it begs the question: how practical is this?
Yes.
How practical is this to apply? The Ministry of Labor steps in, helps the landlord, helps the tenant. How practical is this going forward?
It's extremely practical, and I'll give you many examples of different countries: Argentina, Australia. In fact, in New South Wales, theirs is even more extreme. There, it's a complete moratorium. In the USA, it's a complete moratorium on some of these rent obligations once you register for those benefits with the government. But we are saying, look, this is an opportunity for us. Number one, you realize that many of these tenancy arrangements are not even registered. They're not in the system. Once you're able to get them into the system, because you must protect these people, we have a very good structure in this country, whether it is the provincial administration, whether it is the chiefs, the DOs, and they know within the Nyumba Kumi, they know within our estates that yes, these people have entered into an agreement. Let us be able to give them a tax relief. So a pandemic, and Jeff, a pandemic is ideally a temporary situation. We don't expect it to last for months on end or for years. But during that period, everybody must make some form of sacrifice. It's a time that calls for humanity. We must remember the least fortunate in society, and also remember, because we've provided in the bill, and I must make this very clear, that we're also providing for these landlords, for instance, who have mortgages, to be able to re-amortize those mortgages with their banks. For the banks to say, within this period, one, we're not going to charge you penalties, we are going to be able to agree with you, and many banks are doing it. I don't know if I should mention the names of banks that are already doing it. They're saying, please come and let's rearrange this mortgage arrangement that we have with you. Let's push it down the road, maybe 3 months, so that you don't, give us the interest payments. And so that flexibility is required by all parts of society, Jeff. And we must realize these are exceptional circumstances that call for humanity. We had the president appealing. The president was appealing and said, please, if you're a reasonable landlord and this person has been paying you all this time, they've been giving you an income at such a time that is difficult. If maybe you're earning X amount, and it goes half, understand. So this is just providing a framework for that agreement and providing the opportunity for even tax relief. So it is extremely practical. It's been done elsewhere. That shows you that it's practical. Maybe those jurisdictions have a different economic structure, but Jeff, we cannot say that it cannot be done before we try it, because we must protect these people. People are in trouble today, Jeff. My constituents, many of them, more than 2 million of them are below the poverty line in a county of 4.3 million. They are suffering and they need some form of stability. And we can create that without hurting the landlord, but with protecting the tenant. It is possible.
Okay, having said that, Senator, what's the timeline for your bill? You said by next week, hopefully, it'll be passed in the Senate. That's what you said in your words. What's the timeline after that?
Jeff, what we intend to do, Jeff, next week, it's been published today. We intend for it to go through first and second reading next week, and then we do committee the following week, and then pass it over to the National Assembly. I am hopeful and confident that they will also be able to expedite. And as I've been telling leaders, for a long time, we've had sibling rivalry sometimes between the houses, and I've spoken about this on your show many times. This is a time for us to come together. No matter where the idea comes from, if it is good for the Republic, if it is good for Kenyans, let us implement it. And we're asking Kenyans, Jeff, when we asked for submissions from the public last week, more than 146 different institutions, different individuals, the Council of Governors, Human Rights Commission, the Union of Nurses, Medical Practitioners Unit, gave us submissions. Kenyans are coming together and saying, look, this is a problem we must all deal with together. So that is the spirit of humanity, the spirit of Kenyanness that we are calling for leaders right now to embrace, and for us to be able to ameliorate the situation for most of the Kenyans, beyond the health interventions. And that's the larger part of our work. And I must commend the Speaker of the Senate and the team there, because they've given us an amazing secretariat that is working around the clock, Jeff. I'm talking about 14 meetings, 3 meetings every day online, and they're doing reports, going through each and every single letter of any submission from Kenyans. Because of that, we've been able to make so much progress, and I'm sure with this pragmatism between the Houses of Parliament, we'll be able to have a good law. And there's a raft of many other legislations that we'll need to look at. Some of the submissions from the lawyers and Jawala and Kana, etc., have given us a list of laws that might need to be tweaked in this time.
Senator, allow me to switch gears for a moment, if I will, because you mentioned sibling rivalry in your answer just now.
Yeah.
Jubilee Party, sibling rivalry. Is Jubilee still intact, or is it in a rift?
Jeff, as I've said, at this time, our focus and the minds of Kenyans really must be on fighting coronavirus. And I know that is where the mind of the president is at this particular time, and that must be the focus. All of these sideshows, Jeff, are unnecessary. And whoever is propagating those sideshows, they must all know they're doing the wrong thing. The party remains, it's registered, it's a party that's governing this country, and the leader of the party right now, Jeff, is focused on dealing with corona, and that's what Kenyans want to hear. Kenyans want to hear when they'll be able to go to life back, life as normal. Some of the provisions here, Jeff, we're talking about how do we make sure the mamambogas who bring food, despite this containment, are able to still bring food to Nairobi, that the citizens of Nairobi get water, and Mombasa and Eldoret. That is where the focus must be. And so at this time, when I'm saying we need to deal with sibling rivalry, it also means we need to put our focus and our energy on dealing with this pandemic together as a country. So if even for legislators who have not been seeing eye to eye within the party, amongst different parties, focus, get with the program. The program right now is how we put our minds together, our hearts together, pray for this country, and do our work. Kenyans don't care today about those wrangles. I hope they don't, and I know they don't. My constituents today want to know when they're getting the next meal. Jeff, there's a huge category of Kenyans today who DJs, musicians, taxi drivers, bouncers, clubs are closed, restaurants are closed, waiters, waitresses. Do you think they care about sibling rivalry, or do they care about where the next meal is going to come from, or do they care about how their kids are going to go to school when we get back, to normal functioning? That is where our focus, Jeff. Really, I beg you, that's where our focus must be.
All right, Senator, you know I had to ask, right? I had to ask, but let me come back now. There's a viewer who's asking this question. Will there be government support for your bill? Because let's say, for instance, companies who are not permitted to sack employees, right? How will they pay their staff if their businesses are negatively impacted or closed?
Jeff, if you look at that provision is Section 30 of this bill, which says where a pandemic adversely affects the ability of an employer to pay salaries and wages. Number one, we are saying that during a pandemic, you shall not terminate that contract, but you can be able to send and enter a negotiation and send your staff on some form of unpaid leave. I've had different submissions from people, and I'm like, okay, maybe we can amend that for them to be able to negotiate a way to pay them. But we're saying, Jeff, this is an opportunity. Imagine, Jeff, if while doing this, already we have more than, 20 billion set aside for dealing with this, that if you're able to go and show, because in other countries what we've seen is that government-backed securities, loans in the banks, you can go there and say that during this pandemic, in the month of April and May, my turnover has gone down by 40%, comparable to the same period in the last year. Therefore, I require support to retain my workers. Once you're able to do that, then you can be able to access support from government for you to keep your people employed. Remember, Jeff, I'm saying these are exceptional circumstances. We do not want, just to say, okay, it's everyone for themselves and God for us all. Such things have been done by other countries. We can do it. Jeff, we've had Uwezo Fund of, I think, 6 billion. We've had funds of 20 billion, Youth Fund, etc. If we all put them together during such a time and say, there's a 20 billion business support fund, and I can give you numerous examples around the world, that if you're able to go and demonstrate that I've been employing these people, I've been paying their taxes, I've had 20 people, but you can see from my books, my turnover has gone down from my accounts, comparable to a similar period, because there are different business cycles in a year, in the previous year, and I want to access this percentage of, or this amount of money at a very subsidized rate, even interest-free. It is possible, and that's what I'm providing for. And I don't see why government will not support that. Government should support that, because even in a pandemic, when the private sector, where most people are employed, stops operating, taxes stop being paid, and so it becomes a vicious cycle. And so it is in the interest of government to keep small businesses running. If you look at the coronavirus relief bill, for instance, in the States, the CARES bill, of course, they have a lot of money. They have $2 trillion. But if you look at it, they are so detailed in terms of the kind of support they can give to small businesses and to individual, people who are self-employed. I thank the president for some of the interventions he made on tax. But, we need to go a step further. That lady who, has a shop, one M-Pesa shop in Dagoretti, might not be able to understand how corporation tax reduction is going to help her. She needs immediate small business relief. And so injecting this money, part of it, into the economy for small business relief, and banks have a way of knowing if your cash flows are true, if you've been saying the truth, will go a long way in sustaining and cushioning this economy and cushioning those who might be adversely affected economically by the coronavirus.
All right, Senator, questions are coming in thick and fast on our social media platforms. I'll go to Twitter real quick. Juma Clive is asking, does Sakaja's bill recommend direct disbursement of funds to the people, maybe some M-Pesa, like is the case in the U.S.?
Yes, Jeff. Section 31 talks about social nets, social safety nets and economic safeguards, which also provides an opportunity for government to send cash transfer. Of course, that is a budgetary issue. But indeed, Jeff, and this I must say because it's in the public domain, we all went and took Huduma number. We did the census. We gave our phone numbers. We have a structure of administration that can identify the vulnerable households. And it is possible. We've seen world over, if you ask Abbas Gullet of Red Cross, he'll tell you today the most efficient and effective way of supporting people during a crisis or during a pandemic vulnerable households is actually direct cash transfers. And so we provide for that in section 31 of the bill. And it'll just be, these are framework then for government to be able to, readjust some of the budgets we have and say, okay, during this crisis, and I'm glad we've seen the supplementary appropriation that has come to the National Assembly, that we can then provide direct cash transfers to the most vulnerable in society. And we have the best technology in the world, Jeff. We have M-Pesa, so it's a blessing in disguise. It actually can be done. And so those are the questions. And that is why we're working daily, Jeff, as Parliament, as a Senate, as a National Assembly, to make sure that then on behalf of the people who elected us, we can ask government, given the fact that you have this information, you have these contacts, you have a structure that goes all the way to the village, how then are you going to support directly those who are the most vulnerable in society? So we've provided for that in section 31.
Okay. Crazy GB is saying these politicians are trying to pass populist ideas. In the countries that the senator referred to, all those governments are supplementing with aid or paying salaries on behalf of employers. How can someone pay when there is no income?
Jeff, I don't know if that tweet came before I had spoken about the business support that we're talking about, just because an idea is popular doesn't mean it is populist. Because if it's popular, it means people accept that it needs to be done. Jeff, if all these 50 countries we've benchmarked with have passed legislation that is populist, I think we have no problem being linked with them. But we're saying practically it is working in those countries. Let us not also lower our standards. Let us not say other countries can do it, Kenya cannot. Kenya is trailblazing in a lot of even with the safety net transfers to the aged. We are one of the first countries to be able to do it. And Jeff, just based on the amount of money we appropriate, if we just adjust some of these budgets, as the Cabinet Secretary Ukuretani is saying that we should do, we have the machinery, we have the capacity, we have the technology to be able to do it. So, call it what you may. But what we'd ask such people is really, at this time that we are going to Kenyans for their views, give us your views. Tell us how you think that section should be amended, because that is the essence of Article 10 of our Constitution, public participation. So tell us, I think this cannot work. Let us see if it works or not. And it's for a pandemic, Jeff. We're not saying this is how Kenya will be forever. This is only for the period of a pandemic. And when the president declares the pandemic is over, we go back to business as usual, but we will have seen the structures within our society. So it is possible, it is practical, and we've benchmarked. And all that information, Jeff, by the way, including the countries we've benchmarked, I've put it on my website, sakaja.co.ke. Anybody can go and check it out. Go and review, and I will keep putting the updates. The bill is there, download it, and it will be on Parliament's website. The memorandum of submissions from these 146 great Kenyans and institutions are all there. These are people who are also thinking, and they're saying, okay, this is what we're seeing happening in Rwanda. This is what we're seeing happening in Lagos. The governor of Lagos, what he's able to do. Why can't we do it in Kenya? Why can't we do it in Nairobi? We're able to do it. So we must believe in ourselves. We are great people, Jeff, and we have a great country and a great government.
Absolutely, Senator. Thank you for that. Real quick, I'm not sure if you are in tune with the food distribution to the informal sector. Are you up to speed with that?
Jeff, to some extent, yes.
Because, so Francis Mine is asking ask Honorable Sakaja what criteria is being used when issuing foodstuff and other basic needs in the informal sector. He goes on to say that chiefs allegedly are recruiting their friends secretly, and people are suffering.
Jeff, and for that, I will really ask my colleagues in Parliament, the National Assembly, and the Senate, including MCAs, to be vigilant. I know for most part right now, a lot of the food distribution is really being piloted. There's the idea of whether the vouchers will work or the cash transfers. It is still being piloted at this stage. But Jeff, really, there must be accountability in that. And because what's been happening is that well-wishers, and I want to thank the well-wishers, great Kenyans, from different organizations, from parents associations, from schools, have been coming together and saying, Senator, we want to take this food to Kibera, we want to take this food to Mathare, we want to take this food wherever else. And the Cabinet Secretary of Interior, I think, has said very clearly that let us channel all of those to the administration, through the regional commissioner, and through there, I will make sure, for instance, for Nairobi, that the distribution is done fairly. So that has been mainly from well-wishers, but the full government complement of it, I'm sure, will be rolled out properly. And my work is to make sure that it is done properly and to raise question and maybe even noise if it's not done properly.
Okay, Kennedy Atinda is saying, I fully support the Pandemic Response and Management Bill 2020, but I feel the informal sector hasn't been given a wide berth in the context, and we all know it employs more than 80% of the Kenyan working force.
Jeff, for a long time, what we've been trying to do as a country, and I think great strides have been made since 2008, 2009, is what we call financial inclusion of the informal sector. Because financial inclusion for the informal sector, and remember, many of them had not been banked. Many of them were even called informal, not just because of the kind of job they do, but because of where they put their money under the pillow, and they're not in any formal structure. Right now, with technology, M-Pesa, and all of this, Mshwari, etc., they're in the system. And so when you provide in Section 31 that safety nets be given, and we even say specifically the wording, and I'd like to urge Kenyans to read the bill. The wording there, the word informal sector is put there explicitly, should benefit from such interventions once government is able to roll those out based on government's plan and what we're pushing for in the Senate. So we are thinking about the informal sector, Jeff. I care about the informal sector. I've been part of the informal sector, so we want that to go there. And the informal sector is not just Juakali; it is saloonists, our barbers, the barber shops you're seeing are being affected. Not just our mamambogas, our Uber drivers, Jeff, and all these other digital hailing cabs. Our cameramen. All of these people are part of this informal sector that is not your traditional suit and tie going into the office every day, and that is a majority. Jeff, 83.3% of the youth of this country are employed in the service industry. Many of them are selling things in retail and wholesale. That was a study by the Aga Khan Institute. They must be part of this safety net, Jeff.
No doubt about that, Senator. Real quick, last night on Newsnight, we had both the House Majority Leader and the Senate, your Majority Leader, and they were asked a specific question.
Yes.
Were they willing to take a pay cut?
Yeah.
They said no. Are you?
What did they say? I missed it.
They said no.
Jeff, listen, if you listen to the contents of my bill, one, I am saying that all Kenyans must be ready to tighten their belts. I think it will be very, very, irresponsible of me, or unfair, or dishonest, then for me to say that every Kenyan, tenants, landlords, tenants, employers, should be able to, do with less. And for me as a leader then to say that I'm not willing. Jeff, in as much as the decision is not about voluntary, one person saying, another person saying, and making it populist, Jeff, I'd be willing. I'd be more than willing to do that, if that's what it takes. But even as we enter that discussion, Jeff, because in as much as I would want to do it, and I would do it, and the SRC determines my salary and the PSC, we need to be very practical as well. Every shilling counts, Jeff. The Senate has given 200 million shillings, 200 million, or rather released 200 million shillings from its budget. Kenyans may not be able to appreciate that as much as a pay cut. But practically, Jeff, if all the 67 senators took a pay cut of 500,000, that is 33.5 million shillings. Yet there's already 200 million shillings. A lot of savings can be made, and we can make it 200 million plus 35, yes. But a lot of savings can be made if we go to the fundamentals of the structure of our budgets, Jeff. And that fiscal consolidation and reorganization of our budgets, Jeff, will find a lot of money that can be used to support COVID, not just pay cuts by MPs and senators. So in as much as I would take it, I think we need to, and that is a work the Budget and Appropriation Committee in the National Assembly should be doing now. Open up those budgets. Look at what can be, what is not essential at this time. What can we let go of at this time? My cursory reading of the supplementary appropriation so far is savings of close to 100 billion, and that is the way we should be going. So yes, we want the 33 or 35 million from senators, and I've not calculated for National Assembly members, but let's realize that all of us as Kenyans have a responsibility to play our role in cushioning the most vulnerable in society. So I'd be more than willing, Jeff.
Haba na haba.
Ujaza kibaba.
I hear you. Listen, Senator, I can't let you go without asking you this question. The general has taken over Nairobi County government. And I know Corona hit a little short while later, but your thoughts so far?
Jeff, it's early days. As I said earlier, I think this was the decision that had to be made. In terms of transfer of functions, we're seeing some teething problems. We've seen some complaints from the governor. These are things that we discussed yesterday in the Senate, because the transfer of functions must be done legally. It must be done with full fidelity to the constitution that creates devolved governments. And Article 187 provides for the transfer, but you don't get an inch and take a mile. So there are many things that we want to do in Nairobi in those 4 functions that have been transferred, but we are saying that it must be done properly and within the law. Yesterday, as senators were saying, because the Division of Revenue Bill came and the money that was supposed to go to Nairobi was proposed to have been removed at source. It cannot happen like that. The county assembly must appropriate that money, and then that money is transferred to the national government. It doesn't happen the other way around. The constitutional responsibility for those functions will remain and rests with Nairobi County, and so that's how we'll go.
And the governor has already rejected the supplemental budget.
Jeff, those are things that we will deal with. We will deal with that with the governor, with the DG. We wish the county government to do well. We wish the DG well. I think he started on a good note. We had a meeting with members of parliament from Nairobi. The areas they're focusing on. I know today there's something that we were to do together in parts of Nairobi, and I think he was able to do it. I wasn't able to make it. Jeff, we want goodwill. At the end of the day, the Nairobian in Dandora who voted for us does not really, what the interest is services to be delivered to them. So I think we will get through. We will get through this, and it calls for leadership. We will get through this, teething problems, and all of us want a working Nairobi, especially during this pandemic, Jeff. We need more than 510 tanks put up in Nairobi, and we've mapped out all of those areas. We're talking about high mast water tanks by the Ministry of Water to be put in. We're talking about the food supply chain, and so you have to work with the county government. Even the functions that have remained there are critical at this time, so it should not be a competition. And I'd like to appeal to both the Nairobi Metropolitan Services and the county government that it's not a time to compete. It's a time to come together. It's time to cooperate for the benefit of the people of Nairobi, because I believe those agreements were signed willingly.
Yeah, absolutely, Senator. Well put. Now, in between all your lives and Skypes and onlines and debates and writing this bill, you obviously did find some free time to spend with 2 young men. Take a look at this, if you will, Senator.
Yeah. Give me a bit.
Yo, my name is Sakaja. And my name is Jubilee Sakaja.
Hey, and I'm Super Senator Sakaja.
And we are the Sakajas. We came plugged in like a charger.
Na kuna vitu tunataka kutaja.
Cause Corona has become larger.
Then the NIC.
CBA, Maja.
Hey, so we've got some ideas.
For instance,
try and keep
some social distance.
Wash your hands with soap
and water.
Check your temperature if it's
getting hotter. Check your time, take a home saa moja.
Do you confess your game, Johnny Noma?
Kwa boma, watch TV soma.
Do Corona maze sio kama homa. We'll do all we can do to keep you safe and effective, so please follow the government
directives.
Oh.
Senator, the boys are fantastic. You do not quit your day job.
Oh my God, you cannot. Your first work it must be family. And the president announced 100 million shillings for artists. So we're in that list. We must also get part of that.
Senator, good to see you as always.
No,
Stay
Jeff,
safe.
we're just spending time together.
Yeah. Good stuff.
And they wanted to do a rap song to educate their friends back at school on washing hands, social distancing, the government directives that we must all follow. And I think that was a fun way to to get it done.
Lots of fun, Senator. But like I said, don't quit your day job, okay? Keep doing what you're doing.
Of course. Oh, come on. What are you talking about?
Good to see you, Senator. Senator Johnson.
If all else fails, Jeff, if politics fails, I have another job.
Super Senator Johnson Sakaja there talking to us about the latest on COVID-19 moving forward and the bill that he's proposing. It's called the Pandemic Rescue and Management Bill. Stay tuned for more of that. in future broadcasts. We'll be telling you more about it in the coming days. In the meantime, we're going to take a quick break. We still have sports to go. Stay with us. Keep tweeting at Koinanga Jeff, at Citizen TV Kenya, the hashtag. Stay live. Stay live. Takes a break. We'll be back in a moment.